Okay, I can't guarantee to you that this is going to go well, but at least something is happening. You see, Paradox Interactive is now gambling with City Skylines II. 2 years after release, the original developers are leaving, but support for the game is not ending. Paradox says that they're going to release the console ports, more expansions, more free content, and all of this because they're slotting another developer in where Colossal Order is now leaving a gap, because they're getting yoked. Or being yeeted. We'll see the odd communications around that shortly. Now, it's an ambitious plan, but here's the thing. It's one that Paradox have actually tried before. The last 2 times, the games were still in development, and even with that, the plan did not go well. So, something's happening, but I can't guarantee it's going to be good. So we're all on the same page. City Skylines 2 has been one of the saddest gaming stories of the last 2 years. It seriously is tragic. The publisher Paradox wanted another best-selling, industry-leading city management game, and the developer, Colossal Order, wanted a deeper, richer simulation. That all sounds good, but it basically all went wrong. Launch performance was incredibly dire. Words barely communicate how dire performance was, and this was because Colossal Order were trying to bend half-finished Unity systems into shape. Their simulation was riddled with issues that became more and more apparent as you played, and things just degenerated, and the game had clearly launched well before it should have. Now, at the time, we speculated that maybe some of Paradox Interactive's financials had something to do with it. It was certainly curious and honestly baffling that this game even came out. Yet, apparently, the story goes, Colossal Order were happy to release it at that point in time. Seems insane. Anyway, Colossal Order and Paradox did commit to fixing the game, and they tried to deliver the expansion pass DLC that they promised. And by now, which is 2 years later, they've done a lot, but the game has never lived up to expectations or even the full promise of the developers. The console versions have been indefinitely delayed, and as of this autumn, they have finally delivered the Bridges and Ports DLC. Which, well, as you can tell, took quite a lot of time. It did also close off their expansion pack obligations, but even it didn't go ideally. Players were still underwhelmed, but now they are trying a different tack. The obligations to launch things for the PC players are done, and now the developer is gone, and someone else will be supporting the game from here. Now, as much as I love him, here's the thing about noise-cancelling earbuds. They isolate you. It's great for focus, but it's not good for being present or maybe, going for a run without getting slammed by a car. And that's where the essential open earbuds from today's sponsor Raycon come in. They solve exactly this. And the cool thing is they're basically a new style of earphone I'd never seen before. They have this open ear design that lets you stay connected to the world around you whilst you're still enjoying your favorite music, podcasts, calls, anything. Perfect for a jog, a commute, or just kicking back. And this Black Friday and Cyber Monday, you can save up to 30% on all Raycon audio products. Now, personally, I've been using these when I'm just around the house, where I can be listening to my Rest is History episodes and still be social without, the awkward, hold on a second, you've interrupted me, let me take my earbuds out moment, which can just spurt a bit of tension into the room. Now, they're lightweight, the hook keeps them secure, and with 36 hours of battery between everything, it means I'm barely thinking about charging. So, Black Friday is around the corner, may even be here, and Raycon audio products are 30% off site-wide, so from the everyday essentials to their latest stuff, it is the perfect time to upgrade your sound or to get ahead on doing some gifting. These early deals won't last long, so shop now before they're gone. Just click the link down in the description or go to buyraycon.com/BellularNewsOpen for up to 30% off. That's buyraycon.com/BellularNewsOpen. Today's story begins with the huge bit of news that Colossal Order will no longer develop City Skylines 2. An update on both companies' websites frames this as a mutual decision to, quote, pursue independent paths after 15 years together. As you can tell from my speech, yeah, I'm still feeling a bit salty about all of this. Now, what does it mean in practice? Well, Colossal Order's development ends before 2026 starts. They've delivered a final update with long-requested features like bikes and Old Town buildings, plus a beta version of the modding editor that's been delayed since launch for stability reasons. But that's not the end of this game's service, because City Skylines and seemingly the city's IP will remain with Paradox Interactive, and the development is going to be handed over to another group called Iceflake Studios. Let's talk about them. Iceflake are one of Paradox's internal teams. They were acquired in 2020. Before that, they made mobile games, which doesn't really inspire confidence. But here's the thing, they haven't actually shown anything new since post-apocalyptic survival management sim called Surviving the Aftermath, which was a fine game, but just not one that found a large audience. And up until now, they claim to be working on some new city builders, but I think rather obviously, Paradox are more keen to emphasize that their future is with City Skylines 2. Now, what Paradox are promising then are free updates, more editor improvements, and the eventual delivery of the console editions. Hey, maybe they'll hit the generation after this one, plus more expansions and content packs. That's because while they may not want to work with Colossal Order in the game, Paradox absolutely wants to keep their investment going. They don't need the original developers to do that. And here's the thing, if this sounds familiar to you, if you're a Paradox gamer who's paid attention to all the details and is rightly cynical, well, yeah, you'd be right. This is not the first time this has happened. So, Paradox have been showing a pattern over the last 5 years, where their core grand strategy games like Victoria 3 and Europa Universalis 5, those continue to thrive. The latter even managed to have a strong and uncontroversial launch, which is honestly insane in today's times. But outside of those core titles, Paradox have had a goddamn wild few years. It really is insane. What we've seen is internal projects outside of their main niche just being abandoned left, right, and center. Paradox Tectonic was a studio that was closed after their life simulator, Life by You, was cancelled. Then there was Harebrained Schemes. They were cut loose in 2023 whenever Lamplighters League flopped. But all that's actually nothing compared to how they've been handling their third-party studios like Colossal Order. Because Paradox doesn't actually own Colossal Order. They've worked with them for more than 15 years, but they don't actually own the company. However, crucially, they own the IP. And that means that now that the relationship with Colossal Order is over, well, they can be easily replaced and the brand can continue. Which we have seen happen several times already, and the most recent time didn't really work out that well. It's Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. My god, this game has had a time. So it was contracted out to Hardsuit Labs, and then it was taken away from them and given to the Chinese room so that something could get out the door. Finally. Opinions on how well that went vary, let's just say, but apparently, and this is the really spicy thing, leadership at the studio desperately wanted to call the game something else. Because they know Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a legendary title. But with the game that they were ultimately able to make, they just kind of knew they didn't really earn it, and they probably would have done better with a different title. Quite the allegation. But it's not the only example, because there's also Prison Architect, developed by Double 11, and then handed over to co-developer Koku. And it's a bit weird because shortly after that, the game was indefinitely delayed, and we have had zero word as to when that game will come back. And of course, the last time we saw that game, I think eyebrows collectively hit the roof. The 3D translation, I really don't think that was working out well. So, we've seen that Paradox have done this before. And that means that if City Skylines 2 is somehow in your Steam library, you might be a little bit trepidatious. Now, in each case, handing an existing project over to new developers has had issues. It's not like changing batteries on something. You know, a studio doesn't just suddenly get swapped in and up to full speed. The experience, skills, knowledge of custom tools, game systems, the game itself, and even the community, that stuff all matters. Now, Iceflake do not appear to have been a co-developer on City Skylines, but they are at least projecting confidence. Their studio manager, quote, "Iceflake has the capacity and the capability to get started. We have a decade worth of experience from making city building and management games." So that's all well and good for a statement, and I'm sure they do believe that, but obviously, look at where we're at, look at how we've got here, and look at the other examples of Paradox projects getting handed off. I wouldn't blame you for being concerned, and I wouldn't blame Iceflake for having the willies over all of this, because their future now involves picking up development on a game that is already famously difficult to keep going. It's not a case where they just needed to develop more game, it's more the case that City Skylines 2, for whatever technical reasons, was just bloody impossible to wrangle, right? That will be a challenge for this studio. And unlike the crew working in Prison Architect 2, they've got to do all of this in public, where players will expect new content, and where Paradox will, expect money. And they really are going to need some money, which we'll get to in a sec. Now, there is always the possibility that Iceflake's fresh set of eyes will let them solve problems that Colossal Order couldn't, and they're also based in the same city. That should allow for a little bit more knowledge sharing. But what I would say is rather clear, is that unlike, say, Star Trek Infinite from Nimble Giant Games, or even their homegrown Imperator Rome, Paradox just don't feel comfortable throwing in the towel yet. And that's an understandable thing. You see, City Skylines was basically their biggest thing. Hearts of Iron Bros? Hey, all that stuff's rad. And I love that history as well. But us tank artists, apparently there's just not as many of us as, city builders. So that does actually mean that to Paradox, this is serious goddamn money and massive stakes. With all that said, we need to now talk about Paradox themselves, because they've walked away from games before, both before and post-release. And the history hanging over this is kind of wild. So their last year has basically been about restructuring around their core competencies. Whenever they cancelled Life by You, City Skylines was actually held up as an example of something that was worth fixing, specifically getting the game to a point where modders could step in. And the CCO, Heinrich, told Eurogamer, quote, "Modability and creativity, and players participating in the creation of the game is key to our whole philosophy. That's how we should operate." And you know what? Fair enough, lad. I do agree with you, because if the modders are producing most of the value, that's really good. That's just a bunch of free development. Awesome. It works for Todd. But even beyond that, they are promising more stuff, like the console ports and more expansions. Now, Paradox could have used this moment to draw a line under City Skylines 2. But they obviously didn't. And I think that's because doing so would have been a climb down from what they promised. It would have been Paradox abandoning one of their core competencies, which obviously, for a company like them, a publicly traded company like them, would run completely counter to their investor message. And of course, would totally screw over players who have bought into the game so far. And there are a few of those people, more than a few. City Skylines 2 sold 1 million copies in the first few months of its release, and estimates put another million or so since then. They just can't go and abandon 2 million people, because City Skylines is of a scale unlike Star Trek Infinite, which they were able to abandon, or Lamplighters League, which was just a total write-off for them. And I suppose to slightly more experimental games. And if you're not up to date in their stories, basically, support was basically cut as soon as the games launched. If they were being smart, they probably should have unlaunched the game at its launch and refunded people, and then gave the developers more time to finish the game whilst they're also not having to support it out in the wild. But now we have 2 years of support, millions of sales, and so many promises that mean that if Paradox walks away now, they wouldn't just lose trust with players who bought City Skylines, they would pretty much lose trust of players of every Paradox game. Something especially relevant because they just bought another city management studio earlier on this year. It was the devs of Tropico and Surviving Mars fame. So that means they have to keep City Skylines going, pretty much by any means necessary, especially when you take a look at the recent write-off that they made for Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines 2. That cost them a lot of money. It's not exactly brought them back much money. And that means that if the narrative around their core competency titles collapses, well, they collapse, because that's all they've got. This then feels like a turning point. Iceflake are on a bit of a maintenance treadmill. They've got to keep up with the demands of both Paradox and the players. Paradox will obviously want to see a return on their investments. They will want to get paid DLC rolling. Now, we already know they were happy to work with teams like Tantalus to ship new paid DLC for City Skylines 1 in 2024, seemingly to fill in gaps, both in content for their players, most of whom are actually playing Cities 1, and also, gaps in them not having shit to sell. Now, people will want to feel like they have been given what they were actually promised, and that means the console version, it means the full modding tool release, and it will mean decent support with future content. Now, some players don't necessarily care who makes that stuff, they just want the stuff. But in an industry where funding is harder to find than ever, where Colossal Order have only ever made games for Paradox under one brand, and where audiences, fairly or not, will be holding the reputational stain of City Skylines 2 against them, well shit, they've also got an uphill climb to survive. And I'll tell you what, if you're someone who's deep in that community, or even just the game dev community in that region of the world, and you know vaguely what the inside of this deal looks like, let me know, because is this really mutual? What is the deal there? Did Paradox have an ask that Colossal Order basically knew they couldn't match? Because, you see, very often, and I have seen examples of this a lot, right? And it's a sort of thing that often doesn't really break it into the news because it's all just kind of handled socially and then communicated in, a sort of magnanimous way. Or magnanimous, one of the two. Often you may get a press release where it seems like everyone is great friends, but the actual internal situation may not be that. Given the context of all of this so far, I have to imagine it's something like that. Now, with all that being said, there's another video you should watch. It's this one, because Hytale has actually been saved. And if you want to see our coverage on it and a lot of the texture and all that fun stuff, go watch this video next. Trust me, hell of a story, and it's a banger.